We're good to go?
I've got two unmutes, and I'm using the wrong one. Okay, TSC Foundation for the Node Foundation meeting on the 18th of February 2016. I'm Rod Vag, even though I look like Node.js in the logo. Got Michael Rogers, Jeremiah Sinkpeel, Colin Eric, James Snell, Bert Belder, Alexis Campiler. And we've got a fairly small agenda. Mostly we've covered before, but we're keeping them on the agenda. So not going to do a stand-up or a review of previous meeting because it's not that helpful at this stage, but we're just going to jump straight into talk about preferred meeting tools. Michael, you put this on the agenda, so do you want to tell us what we need to talk about?
I think we actually covered it pretty well in the last meeting. It just ended up carrying over because we didn't get rid of the label, but we're still due to see if this whole bridging Uber conference and YouTube thing works. So yeah, we can do that again for another week until we get that testing done. So.
You and I were going to fiddle around with this, but we never got time.
Yeah, I got slammed. So.
I posted in the thread. I think there's some way to live broadcast to YouTube without using Hangouts, but I'm not sure if that's available to everyone or anything.
For Uber conference?
No, for Hangouts, and then if someone's in the call, they don't need to be in a call for Hangouts. But
yeah,
they can call into something and then live broadcast it.
Right, we're doing that now with Hangouts, so we're broadcasting to YouTube as well.
Right, I just mean without Hangouts.
Okay. I think we've got. If we can use Hangout, these sort of Hangouts on there for most meetings where they fit, that's an easy way to do it. But for CTC meetings where they're getting quite big, it's a problem. We need to find a solution for it. Okay, moving on. Improved process and coordination with the Foundation PR team. Michael, did we discuss this last week?
Yeah, we did. That was another one that just carried over because we didn't get rid of the label.
Okay, so okay. Well, the other two are Appium, who are on hold, and NodeConf, which is on hold. So, is there anything else to discuss?
Well, I think in the vein of those two projects, we could maybe get people's thoughts and where they're at compared to the last time that we had this exact same discussion about what we think the scope of the incubator and projects under the foundation are in general. I know that my thinking has changed on this quite a bit, so I kind of want to get where everybody else is at.
Well, the last time we said we would try to come up with a mission statement.
Of sorts, yeah. I have not updated my stuff because I really haven't had time or energy to do that. I still thinking about how projects that might be applying sort of fit into the story of where Node is today is probably a good basis, and also where it might be in the future. Yeah.
I think also coming up with a set of criteria for what we qualify a project, or how to rate its importance, its strategic importance for the mission statement, which we haven't defined yet.
See, I think you'll end up with the strategic importance from a sort of story basis of it, where it has made an impact already. I'm not really sure if there's a hard set of guidelines we could really apply to that, or if that would really be productive.
Yeah, I think we're all actually saying the same thing. And Jeremiah, I appreciate your attempt to approach it from a different way, which is I think a good way to try. Essentially, what we need to figure out is why does the foundation exist? Or why do we, as the TSC, think the foundation exists? What it means to assist Node and help Node grow if that's if that's why it exists, what that means, and then from there, how do we judge projects to bring in to align with that mission. So I think we can all attack it from different ways, but Jeremiah, I'm keen to help you on your attempt to do it from a story-based approach.
Yeah, I'm not against the story-based approach, but I don't think that we cannot have some sort of guidelines. I mean, maybe they're not hard guidelines. It's not like a piece of code that says this project gets in, this project doesn't, but try to write down somewhere what are some indicators, right? For example, libuv was uncontroversial because we have a dependency on it, right? So whether we have a dependency on a project is one of the criteria that could be included in the guideline. Number of users is also a relevant metric. And there can be other things. Current project governance. So I think we could try to identify those.
Yeah, I think at like minimum it probably should be like in the Node ecosystem in some sort of significant way, whether that's like a dependency of core or I don't know, something that everyone builds off of.
So yeah, I'll throw a few extra little things in here. So I mean, like the Node Foundation's mission is already to support the health and stability of Node. That said, like if we were to take on every project written in Node, we would probably destabilize the Node ecosystem, right? There's something to be said about being like focused on things that are somewhat infrastructural, like to the rest of the ecosystem. One of the interesting things that I've noticed through the Express process, like that changed pretty dramatically, especially after Doug Wilson put all of his projects in, is that we didn't just take on like Express as a project that people directly depend on or use Express. It's actually also the infrastructure for most of web frameworks in Node in general. And so if you look at the overall impact and importance of it, it's beyond just people that npm install Express. It's like all of these other projects that depend on it. And as that project is in the foundation and grows, if something related to that were to come into the foundation, it wouldn't come in at the same level, right? Like if Kraken or Sails or one of these things that depends on Express were to come into the foundation, it would not be at the top level. It would end up being inside of this larger Express project, which actually represents like an entire section of the ecosystem.
So I think like I agreed with Rod that we needed to have this philosophical discussion about like why does the foundation exist. But I think if I frame it for myself, there's a much more practical issue, which is more projects like mean more responsibility to me, and that'd be fine if I gave a shit, really. I care deeply about Node, and I'm very convinced that Express is very important for Node and libuv, obviously, but I don't really care about Appium. So it'd probably be better if it didn't end up on my plate. So I think for the foundation, the question becomes, do you want to be a group of people that care about a particular thing, or do you want to be a shelter for open source projects in general, much like Apache, for example. Either answer for me would be acceptable. If it will be the latter, though, we have to make sure that like every project gets sort of the attention that it deserves, and it's not like just the people that are in the foundation now that somehow get this thrown into their lap. Does that make any sense?
So people are pretty freaked out about the Apache Eclipse thing, like us becoming that large in scope. And like even if we said, we only take projects that are in Node, that eventually is basically everything. Like our growth is way too ridiculous to have that be the criteria, right? Like it would just end up being as big as Apache or Eclipse. And so there's this real question of like how do we I get what you're saying about like this doesn't matter to me, but I do think that we need to be a little bit more broad than like does this matter to the people that have to be on the TSC right now? Like can we quantify the impact that a project has on the greater ecosystem, right? Like people here may not care at all about IoT and robots, but like something like serial port is really fundamental to a huge portion of the ecosystem.
Well, so I mean, I don't agree with your with this parallel. Like, I in a way care about serial port too, but that's mostly because I feel responsible for what Node and libuv does, and robots are like big users of ours, and I want them to be successful. But like with Appium, that distinction is much, that's much further away from, what I feel to be responsible for. I'm not saying that this, what Bert thinks or what Bert cares about should be the norm for what the foundation accepts. Don't get me wrong, but like, can you make sure that the right people end up having the right amount of control over the project? I think that would be much more. It's a much more practical question to answer, and I think if you get that right, there's no real objection from my side anyway.
Well, what I'm trying to figure out, right, is like if we're basically asking ourselves these questions right now, which is like, can we admit Appium? Can we admit NodeConf? And we need to answer those in a way that is not like Bert doesn't care about this, but and like we try to quantify the impact that something has in this way. Like, are you meeting those, right? Because like I may not care about testing, but if Appium was at the same, I actually have no idea, but if Appium is at the same level that Express is to web frameworks, but to testing, it doesn't really matter that I don't give a shit about testing. Like, that's important to a significant enough part of the ecosystem that we need to worry about.
Yeah, I guess I'm thinking it comes down to if whatever the project is didn't exist, would it hurt Node?
Yeah.
It's a good one, actually.
Like if serial port didn't exist, the answer, would mean probably yes, because you couldn't do a whole bunch of things. And Express, I think the answer is yes as well. Appium, I don't know well enough, but if it's the one that everybody used to test all of their Node apps, and without it, test would fall apart, then you might also say yes, right? But I think that's probably the test.
As far as I understand, Appium is the furthest removed from being aligned with the successful Node.js itself, in that its intended use is to test mobile apps. So the apps that you will test in Appium are apps written in Objective-C, and then it's got a server in Node.js somewhere, but it's not really used by Node.js developers necessarily.
Yeah, my feeling, I mean, I can't back this up by any numbers, but it's certainly not the predominant test framework in Node.js, or even a contender to that.
So if it didn't exist, what would the impact be to us?
Well, C# developers would have a harder time, or Objective-C developers would have a harder time testing their mobile apps.
Yeah, I mean, I worry about phrasing things in terms of a vertical like that, though, right? Because like change it and pretend that Cordova wasn't in Apache, right? Tooling is and compile chains are a very important part of our story, and essentially Cordova is like the Express of compile down to mobile apps, right? Like it's underneath a bunch of other tooling, it's its own tooling, it's probably something like 50% market share in all apps that have ever been created on mobile, in the long tail of things, right? Like, that's a huge impact. And you could quantify that, and you could ask the same question of that you're asking of Appium, and it would probably pass our bar for impact.
Well, even closer, you could ask the same questions about Grunt and Gulp. That they are essentially supporting front end for the most part. That people do use them on back end, but that's where they're most popular, and that's where they add most value. But it does actually, that is a primary use case of Node. Tooling is a primary use case. So yeah, I don't think it's easy to draw lines here, but I think that we could come up with guidelines that help us individually make judgments about this sort of stuff. Like I really don't think we can come up with a checklist to say yes, 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 no, no, no. I think what we can do is come up with a philosophy and guidelines that we each apply individually when making these decisions. And those guidelines might be something about how does this support Node adoption and the Node ecosystem? Does it help grow Node? And does it help a sizable portion of the Node user base? Things like that. I'm just doing it off the top of my head. But if we had guidelines like that.
I totally agree, but like those are questions that we sort of ask ourselves when we're evaluating it. What I'm mostly looking for is like questions that we can ask a project when they're being admitted that are not this subjective, that are like questions that would get at the heart of like how relied upon is this technology, right? Like the difference between Grunt and Gulp and like Express is that Express started to break into a lot of components, and it started to become this infrastructure for every other new curve of adoption in web frameworks, right? Whereas Grunt and Gulp have their own individual curves of adoption, but there's always a new thing, and that new thing isn't building on any of the shared infrastructure between Grunt and Gulp necessarily. But like, how do we ask that question of a project, right? Like, how do we get some kind of metric for like, you know, how widely are you dependent upon, that kind of a thing?
And how do we kind of extrapolate that out into something like NodeConf, where it's not software at all, but I could certainly see it belonging in the foundation?
Well, and it may be that like, you know, the constraints that we operate under the TSC are a little bit too specific to like IP policy and code that we can't admit something like that. And we just need to answer that question. Like if the answer is the TSC can't take that in, but the foundation should do something, then we can try to find an alternative way for the foundation to take that in, not under the TSC. And that's okay. We just need to figure out if that is the case, and if we're going to be broad enough to bring in something as abstract as a collective of conferences that are all run by individuals.
Right. Now, a bunch of the questions...
We could ask.
I was just going to say a bunch of the
Go ahead, Michael.
questions that Rod had phrased apply equally to something like the conferences as they do to the specific technologies. You know, does it help grow, you know, Node? Does it, you know, is it dependent on for information, that kind of stuff? So it's interesting that, you know, that one in particular does fit into some of those questions.
We could ask open-ended questions of projects when they're coming in and let them respond in prose or with numbers or however they choose to respond. But things like, how does your being in the Node Foundation support the existing Node ecosystem? How does your being in the Node Foundation grow Node adoption? So ask those questions and let them respond, because like with Appium, the fact is I don't think important Appium is out there, and perhaps it's actually really vital, and we just don't see that. So if we give them the opportunity to make that case, then it gives us insight into a world that we don't necessarily have good insight into. And I think that's something that Michael's been struggling with as well, which is that we're all extremely focused on core, and we have our heads down in core, and we're not actually that good at looking across the ecosystem and understanding the things that are becoming important to users. And that is an important point that we need to be attuned to. And we can't just even solve that by adding new people, because that's just, you know, new people that have an insight into a part of the Node ecosystem. So let them make that case, and then we can respond to that by researching and validating that.
That being said, like, I think things that we would look on bringing in, we should somehow specify that there needs to be some focus on like supporting Node.js, because like whether Appium isn't or isn't focused on supporting Node.js, I don't really know, but like we wouldn't take in like a strictly front end only, like, I don't know, something or other that runs on the front end and it's like framework like and has nothing to do really with Node, except maybe we serve APIs to it or something. Like I don't think that would really fit, because that's not really the focus like of us. Like there'd be something like the jQuery Foundation or something like that that's like a more front end focused thing that would be that I think something like that would be better suited in. So yeah, I definitely think that there needs to be some like basis of this supports like Node.js, not just runs on it, like supports it.
Also, like, I mean, as we're going through this process, we're creating a lot more for the rest of the ecosystem that is not just hosting projects, right? So a lot of these questions are like, what is the value of the incubator in the whole process of bringing projects into the foundation? And what are we trying to accomplish there that we can't just accomplish by like publishing these new contribution policies that we're iterating on, or, you know, even paying people to speak about those and trying to like proliferate a lot of these ideas outside of hosting the projects necessarily.
Okay, maybe we've exhausted this for now, and we need to each carve out some time during our week to think at this level, because I know most of us are heads down in core, which is becoming increasingly busy. I've been sharing this with both Michael and James that our numbers for contributions are going through the roof, and consistently so. Like the last 2 months, we've broken records on the number of unique contributors per month. Our number of commits per month is steadily rising. All of the metrics are basically just going up and showing no bottoming. And I think that means that we're all, those of us that are heads down in core are just completely absorbed with everything that's going on, and we need to try and find time during our week to set aside to thinking about things at this level so that we can, core's going pretty well, so how about we think more about how to make Node itself go even better. So Node as a ecosystem and a community. So if we can try and do that, maybe next week we can come back with something more constructive to chew on. Does that sound good?
That sounds good. Next week I won't be here though. Is there? This is mainly a question for Michael. Is there like a deadline or a target date for when we have to make a decision about Appium? Yeah. Or you have the feeling they'll get like impatient and say never mind, or what do you think?
I mean, just to be respectful to them, like I want to be open with them about where we're at and try to like having these applications outstanding is going to help us with this process because we have specific things that we can ask about. So I want to just keep that line of communication open, and when we get to a point where we know if we will in the future possibly take them or just no, then I want to tell them that so that they can look elsewhere. NodeConf, we have like a much more indefinite timeline.
Right. Okay.
Oh, but also there are other projects that are signing up now. So sorry, I've been getting a lot of emails in the background about projects that want to come on board, and to be perfectly honest, a lot of them we probably don't want to take on necessarily. So I think that what I've been telling them right now is that we're not taking anything for at least a month until we figure Express out, and at that point we'll have much better documentation. So as long as we're sort of in the thick of bringing Express through the incubator, I think that we can properly defer all of those applications.
Cool. Like the only thing is like with no target date, this discussion might like drag on for a very long time. But it will no puppies will be harmed during that process.
It'd be nice to have a target for setting up the questions we'd want to ask the projects.
Yeah, so
I think we told them to hold off for like, was it a month, or like we said we would get back to them?
I think a month.
Okay.
Yeah. And well, so for the questions and stuff, like we need to like once we start to figure this out, I'll sit down and write them up. But we should really update the documentation for applying and update the list of things that we're asking them there. So we'll have like better documentation and more quantifiable documentation. And I think a slight reorganization of the TSC repo is probably going to need to happen as well. Cool.
Okay, let's try to do this within the next couple of weeks if we can, or at least make visible progress within the next couple of weeks. Because we haven't really made progress, at least in this last week. And I think that's justifiable, but I think if we all want to operate at the TSC level, then we do need to take some responsibility for stepping back from core a little bit, just the weeds of core, just so that we can think a bit more structurally.
So where would we write down, these questions? Like if we're working on it this week and come up with drafts, should we put them somewhere? And
pull requests against the TSC repo probably for the documentation side of things.
Okay.
Another thing that should probably be on our radar that I forgot to put on the official agenda, the board will probably be approving the guidelines for top-level projects in the next board meeting. Once we have that, that's essentially a guideline for what the shape that we want to try to get the IP into before we graduate anything out of the incubator. And I'm going to try to write a lot of automated tooling to figure that out, because across 100 repos on 3 orgs for Express, it's just not going to work to try to manually do any of this. So we're going to learn a lot through that process as well. Yeah, we'll just want to automate all of this auditing and then document all of that really rigorously. So.
Okay, well, without further business, how about we close this up for the day?
Before we close it up, should we give a quick recap of anything Express related?
Oh, that's a good point.
Because we didn't really do it at the start, so.
Yeah.
So we're trying to organize a meeting right now, although it's a little bit hard with everyone's times. I don't think Doug can do the meeting during work hours, so that makes it a little bit more complicated too.
We have quite a few different time zones involved.
Yeah.
I'm currently getting I'm doing it as we speak, getting the Express TC team put together on Express.js GitHub org. I've invited all of the members, or all of the owners of the 3 organizations, and also added myself and Michael as the to that team, but not as voting members. So. Other than that, I don't think that there's much else. Right, Jeremiah?
Nothing in particular, I don't think. It's a little bit of a slow start, but everything seems to be fine otherwise, I think.
On that point, I will be completely unavailable next week. Jeremiah, if anything comes up around Express, I'm going to be tied up at the IBM conference.
Okay. Yeah, I think the big first step is to have a sort of first meeting with everyone and go from there.
Yep.
So that's still a work in progress. Yeah.
Great, thanks for working on this, you two. Great stuff. Okay, let's end up, and unless there's any other business? No? Okay. Thanks for joining, and thanks for keeping it shorter than an hour. So, bye for now.
Bye.